The carriage rattled over another broken stone in the drive, and Alexander Whittaker pressed his gloved hand against the doorframe. 6 years. He had not set foot on Blackmir Hall grounds in 6 years, and even now, as the estate materialized through the November mist, he felt his throat tighten. The house rose from the fog like something carved from memory and regret. 3 stories of weathered stone, chimneys silent, windows dark, abandoned, as it should be, as he had left it. The driver stopped at the entrance. Alexander stepped down, his boots landing on gravel strangled by weeds. He had sent no word ahead. There was no one to inform. The small staff he had maintained had been dismissed 2 years ago when the money ran out. The house should be locked, silent, and waiting for the surveyors who would arrive in 10 days to appraise it before the sale. He climbed the stone steps, key already in his hand. But when he turned the handle, the door opened. Unlocked. Alexander went still. Then he heard it. A child coughing. Sharp, wet, echoing from somewhere deep inside the house. A woman's voice followed, low and soothing, words he could not make out. His hand moved instinctively toward his waist, but he carried nothing. He stepped inside. Warmth. That was the first shock. The entrance hall smelled of beeswax and something cooking. Bread, perhaps. The drawing room to his left flickered with firelight. A basket of mending sat beside one chair. 2 plates rested on a side table. Impossible. The coughing came again, louder now. Upstairs. The west wing. Alexander took the stairs quickly, every nerve tightening. Of the west wing. Logan's wing. The corridor was dark, except for a thin line of light beneath one door. The room that had been his brother's. He pushed the door open. A woman stood beside the bed, her back to him, tucking blankets around a small boy. She wore a simple grey dress, her dark hair pulled back in a loose knot. The child, maybe 5 or 6, sat propped against pillows, pale and flushed at once, a small wooden horse clutched in his hands. "Mamma, will the Duke's ghost come tonight?" the boy asked, his voice drowsy. The woman laughed softly. "There is no ghost, Kai. I have told you." "There is someone here," Alexander said. The woman spun, one hand flying to her throat. She was younger than he expected, perhaps 30, with steady hazel eyes that widened but did not panic. She did not scream. Instead, she stepped between him and the child, her body a shield, her chin lifting. "Who are you?" she demanded. The audacity nearly startled a laugh from him. "I am Alexander Whittaker. This is my house. The question is, who are you, and what are you doing in it?" Her face went pale. "The Duke of Blackmir. You are not supposed to be here." Now he did laugh, short and hard. "I assure you, madam, I have considerably more right to be here than you do." The boy began to whimper. The woman glanced back at him, her expression softening for a breath before she turned back to Alexander, shoulders squaring. "Please lower your voice. My son is unwell. Your son is in my brother's bed. Your brother is dead." The words came out flat, factual, and they hit him like a blade between the ribs. She seemed to realize the cruelty immediately, for something flickered across her face. Regret, perhaps. "I apologize. That was indelicate. But you abandoned this house 6 years ago. I was told it was unoccupied." "Told by whom?" "The agent in the village, Mr. Joe Hamilton. I paid 6 months' rent in advance." Alexander stared at her. "Mr. Joe has no authority to let this house. He had keys. He showed me documents. Forged documents, evidently." He stepped closer, studying her. She did not retreat, though her hands trembled slightly before she clasped them together. You paid 6 months in advance. Yes, £40. £40, the exact amount Mr. Joe had sent him 3 months ago, with a note about unexpected income from estate resources. Alexander closed his eyes briefly. The bastard had exploited an abandoned property and pocketed the money. "Oh, that money is gone," he said quietly. Her face hardened. "Then you owe me 6 months' occupancy." "I owe you nothing. You are trespassing." "I am a tenant with a legal contract." "A fraudulent contract." She took a step forward, dropping her voice to barely above a whisper. "I have nowhere else to go. If you throw me out tonight, we will sleep in the woods. My son has a fever. It is November. Do you understand what I am telling you?" He understood. He understood she was desperate, that she was protecting her child, that she would say or do whatever necessary to keep him safe. He understood because he saw in her eyes the same fierce determination he had seen in his own reflection 6 years ago, when he had fled this house rather than face what he had done. "What is your name?" he asked. She hesitated. "Sophie Powell. And I am a widow." Of course she was. A widow alone, desperate enough to rent a country house in the middle of nowhere through a corrupt agent. He should summon the constable, have her removed, reclaim his property. Instead, he said, "You may stay tonight. Tomorrow we will discuss arrangements." Her relief was visible, a softening of her rigid stance. "Thank you." He turned to leave, then paused. "How long has the boy been ill?" 3 days. It is only a cough, but it worsens at night. Alexander looked at the child, Kai, who watched him now with wide, tired eyes. "There is mint in the kitchen garden. Boiled with honey, it will ease his breathing. The garden is overgrown. Southeast corner, it is wild, but the mint survives." He left before she could respond, closing the door behind him. His hands were shaking. He descended the stairs. They walked through the drawing room and out the back entrance into the November cold. The garden was a ruin, as he had known it would be. But in the southeast corner, half buried beneath dead bracken, he found the mint. Still green, still pungent. He gathered a handful and stood there in the darkness, breathing hard. He had come here to sell the house, to finally sever the last tie to the place where Logan had died, to close a chapter he should have closed 6 years ago. Instead, he had found a widow and a sick child sleeping in his brother's room. God help him. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us return to our main character. Alexander woke to the smell of bread baking. He had taken one of the servants' rooms on the ground floor, unwilling to sleep in any of the family chambers. The bed was narrow, the blankets thin, but he had slept in worse. For a moment, disoriented, he thought he had dreamed the night before. Then he heard footsteps overhead. Light. Quick. Feminine. It had been real. He rose, washed in cold water from the basin, and dressed. When he entered the kitchen, he found Sophie Powell at the stove, turning bread on a griddle. She wore the same grey dress as the night before, covered now with a faded apron. Her hair was pinned more neatly, though a few dark strands had escaped to curl at her nape. She glanced up as he entered, her expression guarded. "Good morning, Your Grace." "Mrs. Powell." He looked around. The kitchen was clean, orderly, the table set with 2 plates and a small cup. Where is your son? Still sleeping. The mint helped. Thank you. He nodded, unsure what to say. He was not accustomed to sharing his space, least of all his kitchen, with strange women who thanked him for garden herbs. She slid bread onto a plate and set it before him. I have only butter and jam. No meat, I am afraid. This is fine. He sat, acutely aware that she remained standing, waiting. Please sit. She hesitated, then took the chair across from him. They ate in silence for a moment. The bread was good, still warm, the butter melting into its surface. You bake, he said. I do many things. There was no pride in her voice, only a statement of fact. How did you come to be here, Mrs. Powell? Truly. She set down her bread, her gaze meeting his directly. My husband died 8 months ago. We lived in his brother's house in Dartshire. After the funeral, Christopher, my brother-in-law, made it clear he expected me to remain as his wife. Alexander's jaw tightened. You refused. I refused. He is not a kind man, Your Grace. He was cruel to my husband, and he would be cruel to Kai. I could not. She stopped, shook her head. I took what money I had and left. I needed somewhere remote, somewhere Christopher would not think to look. Mr. Joe had promised me this house was forgotten, unvisited, that I could live here quietly for 6 months. But I hoped by then I would have found some other solution. She looked down at her hands. I did not plan for the Duke of Blackmir to return unannounced. I did not plan to return at all. The admission surprised him, even as he spoke it. She looked up, her hazel eyes sharp with intelligence. But you did, she said quietly. Why? The estate is failing. I must sell the house to settle debts. The surveyors arrive in 10 days. He watched her process this, saw the calculation in her eyes, the quick assessment of time and options. She was clever, this widow. Too clever to have been taken in by a man like Mr. Joe, unless she had been truly desperate. I see, she said finally. Then we are both here by necessity. It would seem so. And you wish me gone before the surveyors arrive. I cannot afford to complicate the sale. She nodded, her expression carefully neutral. But he saw the way her hands gripped the edge of the table, the slight tremor in her fingers. How long do I have? 10 days. That is not enough time. It is the time you have. Something flashed in her eyes. Anger, perhaps, or fear, transmuted into rage. You said I could stay the night. You did not mention that night would be the first of only 10. You have been here, what, 3 weeks? 4. Then you have had 4 weeks to prepare for this eventuality. You knew the arrangement was precarious. I knew no such thing. Mr. Joe assured me, Mr. Joe is a liar and a thief. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. As are you, Your Grace. You took my money I paid in good faith, and now you refuse to honor the agreement. There is no agreement. There is a promise. Or does the word of a duke mean less than the word of a corrupt agent? He rose slowly, heat rising in his chest. You forget yourself, madam. And you forget that I am not the one who abandoned this house and left it to rot. You forget that I am not the one who profited from fraud while a widow and child sought shelter. You are right, Your Grace. There is no agreement. There is only your conscience, if you possess one. The words landed like blows. He wanted to rage at her, to throw her audacity back in her face. But beneath the anger, he felt something else. Shame. Because she was right. He had abandoned this place. He had let it fall into ruin rather than face his ghosts. And when Mr. Joe had sent him £40 3 months ago, What he had not questioned its source, he had simply spent it. 10 days, he said, his voice hard. After that you must go. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she turned and walked out of the kitchen, her footsteps echoing up the stairs. Alexander stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the smell of bread and the weight of his own failure. The cough worsened that night. Alexander heard it from his room, wet, rattling, punctuated by the child's frightened cries. He lay in the dark, listening, telling himself it was not his concern. The widow would manage. She had managed thus far. The coughing continued. With a curse, he rose and climbed the stairs. The door to Logan's room stood ajar, candlelight spilling into the corridor. He pushed it open. Sophie sat on the bed, Kai cradled against her chest. The boy's face was flushed. His breathing labored. She looked up as Alexander entered, her expression desperate. "I do not know what to do," she whispered. "The mint is not enough." Alexander crossed to the bed. "Let me see him." She hesitated, then shifted so he could place a hand on the boy's forehead. Hot. Too hot. The child's lips were tinged blue. "He needs steam," Alexander said, "and elevation. The fluid is settling in his lungs." "How do you—" "My brother had weak lungs as a child. I learned." He did not wait for her response, instead striding to the door. "Boil water. Bring it here with towels, as many as you can carry." She obeyed without question, hurrying past him. Alexander looked down at the boy, who watched him with fevered, glassy eyes. "You will be well," he said, surprised by the gentleness in his own voice. "As I promise." Kai's small hand reached out, gripping Alexander's finger. The trust in that grip, unearned, innocent, nearly undid him. Sophie returned with a pot of steaming water and an armful of linens. Together they fashioned a tent over the bed, draping towels over the posts and letting the steam gather beneath. Alexander propped Kai up with pillows, angling him so his lungs could drain. "Stay with him," Alexander instructed. "Keep the steam going. If he worsens, call for me." "Where are you going?" "To fetch yarrow from the garden. It will bring down the fever." He did not wait for her gratitude, already moving outside. The night was cold and clear, stars scattered across the black sky. He found the yarrow by moonlight, its feathery leaves distinct even in the dark. When he returned, Sophie had not moved, her hand stroking Kai's hair as the boy breathed the warm, herb-scented air. Alexander brewed the yarrow into a tea, added honey to mask the bitterness, and brought it to the bedside. "Small sips," he told Sophie, "every few minutes." She took the cup, their fingers brushing. Her hands were cold. "You should rest," he said. "I cannot." "Then I will stay." She looked at him, surprise flickering across her face. "You do not have to." "I know." He pulled the second chair close and sat. For hours they kept vigil together, saying little, watching Kai's breathing slowly ease. Near dawn, the boy's fever broke, his skin cooling, his sleep deepening into something natural and restful. Sophie sagged in her chair, tears sliding silently down her face. "He will recover," Alexander said quietly. "'Twas because of you. Because you did not give up." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture at once weary and defiant. "I never give up, Your Grace. It is my greatest flaw and my only virtue." He almost smiled. "Not your only one." She met his gaze, and for a moment something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, of shared stubbornness, shared refusal to yield. Then she looked away. "Thank you," she whispered. "You are welcome." As dawn light crept through the window, Alexander realized he was still sitting in Logan's room, The room he had not entered in 6 years. The room he had sworn never to enter again. And yet here he was. Kai recovered slowly. For 3 days, Alexander found reasons to check on him, to bring fresh water, to adjust the pillows, to open the window for air. Sophie watched him with quiet curiosity, but said nothing. On the 4th day, Kai spoke to him. "Are you really a duke?" Alexander was standing by the window, examining a crack in the frame. He turned. "I am." "Do you have a castle?" This house was once grand enough to be called one. "It is very big." Kai's voice was still weak, but his eyes were clearer now. "Mama says we have to leave soon." Alexander felt something tighten in his chest. "Yes." "Where will we go?" "I do not know." The boy considered this, turning the wooden horse over in his hands. "I like it here. It is quiet. At Uncle Christopher's house, there was always shouting." Alexander crossed to the bed and sat in the chair Sophie usually occupied. "Your uncle shouted?" "At Maman, he wanted her to marry him, but she said no. He got very angry." Kai looked up at him. "Are you angry we are here?" The question, so innocent, so direct, cut through every defense Alexander had built. "No," he said quietly. "I am not angry. Mama says you are sad. She says the house makes you sad." Alexander's throat tightened. "Your mother is very perceptive." "What does that mean?" "It means she sees things clearly." Kai nodded, as if this made perfect sense. Then he held out the wooden horse. "Do you want to see?" "Papa made it for me before he died." Alexander took the horse, turning it over in his hands. The craftsmanship was crude but careful, made with love. "It is very fine," he said, handing it back. "Papa was kind, not like Uncle Christopher." Kai paused. "Are you kind?" The question should have been easy to answer, but Alexander found himself silent, searching for words. Before he could respond, Sophie appeared in the doorway. "Kai, you should rest." Her eyes met Alexander's. "Your Grace." He stood. "He is doing well." "Thanks to you." He nodded and left the room, but Kai's question followed him down the stairs. "Are you kind?" He did not know the answer. On the 6th day, Alexander rode into the village. The morning was cold, the sky heavy with the promise of rain. He found Mr. Joe Hamilton in his office above the coaching inn, a cramped room that smelled of tobacco and damp paper. Mr. Joe looked up as Alexander entered, his face going pale. "Your Grace, I was not expecting—" "No, you were not." Alexander closed the door behind him. "You let my house to a widow named Sophie Powell. You told her you had authority to do so." Mr. Joe's hands fluttered over the papers on his desk. I acted in your best interest, or your Grace. The house was sitting empty. You thought you could pocket the rent and I would never know. It was not like that. You forged documents. You took £40 from a desperate woman and sent the money to me, knowing I would not question its source. You exploited both of us." Mr. Joe stood, backing toward the window. "I meant no harm. The house was abandoned. She needed shelter. It seemed like an opportunity." Alexander's voice was quiet, which made it more dangerous. "Tell me, Mr. Joe, how many other properties have you done this to? How many other absent landlords have you cheated?" "None. I swear." "Liar." The word hung in the air. Mr. Joe's face crumpled. "Please, Your Grace, I have a family. If this gets out, you should have thought of that before you committed fraud." Alexander stepped closer. "Or you will return every penny to Mrs. Powell, all £40. You will write a letter confessing what you have done and deliver it to me by tomorrow morning. And you will resign your position as agent. If you do not, I will see you prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Do you understand?" Mr. Joe nodded, his face ashen. "Good." Alexander turned toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. If you ever come near Mrs. Powell or her son again, I will ruin you. Completely." He left without waiting for a response. As he rode back to Blackmir, the first drops of rain began to fall. The storm arrived with fury. By evening, rain hammered the windows like fists. Wind tore at the roof, pulling loose tiles and sending them crashing into the courtyard. Alexander moved through the house with Sophie, placing buckets beneath leaks, deshuttering windows, securing doors. In the west wing, water poured through a crack in the ceiling, pooling on the floor of the corridor outside Logan's room. "We need to move Kai," Alexander said, raising his voice over the wind. Sophie nodded, already gathering blankets. Together they carried the boy downstairs to the drawing room, where the fire still burned. They made a bed for him on the sofa, tucking him in tightly. "Stay here," Alexander told Sophie. "I need to check the upper floors." "I will come with you." "No. Stay with your son." But she followed him anyway, her jaw set. They climbed to the third floor, where the storm was loudest. A window had blown open in one of the old servant rooms, rain flooding the floor. Alexander fought to close it, his hands slipping on the wet frame. Sophie grabbed a towel and wedged it beneath the window, giving him leverage. Together they forced it shut. They stood there, soaked and breathing hard. "You should have stayed downstairs," he said. "You should not be doing this alone. This is my house, my responsibility. And I am living in it. That makes it my responsibility too." He looked at her, rain dripping from her hair, her dress clinging to her frame, and something shifted inside him. A crack in the wall he had built around himself. "You are stubborn," he said. "So are you." They returned downstairs. Kai was asleep on the sofa, his breathing steady. Sophie sank into a chair, exhausted. Alexander stoked the fire and fetched blankets. "You are shaking," he said, draping one over her shoulders. "I am fine." "You are not." She looked up at him, her eyes bright with something. Defiance, perhaps, or gratitude, or both. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "You could have thrown us out. You still can." Alexander sat in the chair opposite her, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. "I do not know." "Yes, you do." He met her gaze. "Because I understand what it means to run from something, to be desperate, to need a place to hide." "What are you running from?" The question landed like a stone in still water. For a long moment, Alexander said nothing. The fire crackled, the storm raged outside, and then, quietly, he began to speak. "My brother Logan, he died here, 6 years ago, in the West Wing." Sophie's expression shifted. Understanding dawned. "That is why you sealed it. Why you left." "Yes." "How did he die?" Alexander's hands clenched. "They said it was an accident. He fell, hit his head. But it was not an accident. Not entirely." Sophie leaned forward. "What do you mean? We were arguing. It was stupid, childish. I do not even remember what it was about. But I was angry and I—" He stopped, the words caught in his throat. "I pushed him. Not hard, just enough to make a point. But he lost his balance. He fell, and he never got up." The confession hung in the air, raw and ugly. Sophie did not look away. "You did not mean to hurt him." "Intent does not matter. He is dead because of me." "Intent is all that matters." Her voice was firm. "You did not kill him. It was an accident, a terrible, tragic accident. But it was not murder. I have told myself that for 6 years. It changes nothing. It changes everything. She reached across the space between them and took his hand. Her grip was strong, grounding. You cannot bring him back, but you can stop punishing yourself. Alexander looked down at their joined hands. I do not know how. Start by staying, by not running anymore. I know some of you are still watching, but many have already moved on. If this story means something to you, if you want to see how Alexander finally faces his past, please take a second and subscribe. It is free. It helps more than you know, and it tells us you care. We notice when you do not. Every view without a subscription feels like we are shouting into the void. Please, just hit that button. Let us know you are here. Now, back to the story. The storm lasted 3 days. During that time, as Alexander and Sophie worked side by side, repairing what they could, shoring up weaknesses in the house, Kai recovered his strength and began to explore the lower floors, his laughter echoing through rooms that had been silent for years. On the third night, the rain finally stopped. The house settled into quiet. Alexander stood in the West Wing corridor, staring at the door to Logan's room. Sophie found him there. You have not been inside since we moved, Kai, she said. No. Why not? Because I am afraid. She stepped beside him. Of what? Of what I will feel, of what I will remember. You cannot avoid it forever. I have managed for 6 years. And look what it has cost you. She reached for the door handle. Let me come with you. He did not stop her. She pushed the door open, and they stepped inside together. The room was cold, was empty. The bed stripped, the furniture covered in dust, but it was not the tomb Alexander had imagined. It was just a room. This is where it happened, he said quietly. Right there, by the window. Sophie walked to the spot, looking down. Tell me what you remember. Everything. His face when he realized he was falling, the sound he made when he hit the floor, the way I froze, unable to move, unable to help him. You were how old? 24. And Logan? 21. Sophie turned to face him. You were young. You were brothers. You fought. That is what brothers do. What happened was not your fault. I killed him. No, you did not. Her voice was fierce now. You made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But you did not murder him. And you have paid for that mistake every day since. When does it end, Alexander? When do you forgive yourself? He sank to his knees, the weight of 6 years crashing down on him. I do not know if I can. Sophie knelt beside him, taking his face in her hands. Then let me help you. And there, in the room where his brother had died, Alexander Whittaker wept. He wept for Logan, for the years he had lost, for the man he had become and the man he should have been. Sophie held him, saying nothing, her presence the only absolution he needed. When he finally stopped, when the tears had run dry, he looked at her. Why are you doing this? Because I understand guilt. I understand loss. And I understand what it means to need someone to tell you that you are not broken beyond repair. I am not a good man. You are a man who has made mistakes. That does not make you beyond redemption. He searched her face, looking for judgment and finding none. I do not deserve your kindness. Maybe not, but you have it anyway. In that moment, something shifted between them. A door opened, and Alexander knew, with sudden clarity, that he could not let her go. Stay, he said, not for 10 days. Not as a tenant. Stay. Sophie's eyes widened. What are you asking? I do not know. I only know that this house feels less empty when you are in it. That I feel less empty when you are in it. Stay. Please. She looked at him for a long moment, weighing his words, searching for sincerity. Then, slowly, she nodded. I will stay. 2 days later, a carriage arrived at Blackmir Hall. Alexander was in the garden, clearing debris from the storm, when he heard the wheels on the gravel. He looked up to see a man stepping down, tall and well-dressed, his expression cold. Sophie appeared on the front steps, her face going white. Christopher. The man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Sophie. It has been quite a search. Alexander crossed the garden quickly, placing himself between Christopher Powell and the house. You are trespassing. Christopher's gaze shifted to him, sizing him up. And you are? Alexander Whittaker, Duke of Blackmir. This is my estate. Ah, the absentee landlord. Christopher's smile widened. I have heard stories. Tell me, Your Grace, are you aware that you are harboring a fugitive? I am harboring a widow and her son. A widow who fled in the night with property that does not belong to her. Kai is my son, Sophie said, her voice shaking. He belongs with me. The boy is your husband's son, and as his closest male relative, I am his legal guardian. I have documents. Christopher reached into his coat and produced a folded paper. Signed by a magistrate. Alexander took the paper, scanning it quickly. It was legitimate, or appeared to be. This changes nothing, Alexander said. The boy is in my care now, under my protection. Christopher laughed. Your protection means nothing, Your Grace. The law is clear. The boy comes with me. No. Sophie's voice was steel. I will not let you take him. You have no choice. Christopher moved toward the steps, but Alexander blocked him. You will not enter this house. Christopher's expression darkened. You overstep, Your Grace. This is a matter of family and law. You have no standing. I have every standing. This is my property. And I say you leave. Now. For a moment, the two men stood locked in silent confrontation. Then Christopher smiled again, cold and calculating. Very well. But I will return. With the constable. And when I do, you will have no choice but to comply. He climbed back into his carriage. Enjoy your time with the boy, Sophie. It will be short. The carriage pulled away, leaving silence in its wake. Sophie sank onto the steps, her hands trembling. He will take Kai. The law is on his side. Alexander knelt beside her. Not if I have something to say about it. You cannot fight the law. No, but I can change the circumstances. He took her hands. Trust me. Alexander rode to the village that afternoon and returned with Father Harley Pierce, the parish priest. He found Sophie in the drawing room, Kai playing quietly on the floor. Your Grace? Sophie stood, confused. Yeah, why is the father here? Because I have a proposal. Alexander crossed to her, his expression serious. Christopher Powell has the law on his side because he is Kai's closest male relative. But if Kai had another guardian, one with greater legal standing, Christopher's claim would be invalidated. Sophie's eyes widened. What are you saying? I'm saying I wish to adopt Kai, legally, as my son and heir. The words hung in the air. Sophie stared at him, speechless. You cannot, she whispered. You do not even know him. I know he is brave. I know he is kind. I know he deserves better than a man like Christopher Powell. Alexander glanced at Kai, then back at Sophie. I know I cannot give him back his father, but I can give him a future, a name, a home, if you will let me. Tears filled Sophie's eyes. Why would you do this? Because it is right, because I can, because I want to. Father Harley stepped forward. The process is simple. I can draw up the papers tonight. With your consent, Mrs. Powell, the adoption can be finalized within the week." Sophie looked at Kai, who had stopped playing and was watching them with wide eyes. "Would you like that, Kai? Would you like the Duke to be your father?" Kai nodded slowly. "Will I still be with you? Always." "Then yes." Sophie turned back to Alexander, her expression raw with gratitude and something deeper. "Yes, I consent." Father Harley smiled. "Then it is settled. I will prepare the documents." That night, after the father had left, Alexander found Sophie standing at the window of the drawing room, looking out at the darkened grounds. "You gave him your name," she said softly. "But you gave him everything. I gave him what he needed, what you both needed." She turned to face him. "And what do you need, Alexander?" The question caught him unprepared. He had spent 6 years avoiding that very question, burying it beneath guilt and distance. "I need," he said slowly, "to stop running. I need to build something instead of destroying it. I need—" He paused, searching for words. "I need this house to be a home again." Sophie stepped closer. "And can it be? After everything that happened here?" "I think so, if I am not alone in it." The words carried weight, intention. Sophie understood immediately. "Alexander, I am not asking out of obligation or necessity. I am asking because I want to." He took her hands. "Stay with me. Not as a tenant, not as someone I rescued, as my partner, my equal. Help me make Blackmir live again. You are asking me to be your Duchess. I am asking you to be yourself. The Duchess part is merely a title." Sophie searched his face, looking for doubt, for hesitation. She found neither. "I will not be a decoration," she said firmly. "I will not be silent. I will challenge you. I will speak my mind. I will run this estate as I see fit. I would expect nothing less. And Kai is my son. Our son. He will inherit everything. Christopher Powell will never touch him." Sophie's eyes glistened. "Then yes, I will stay. I will marry you." Alexander pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her, and for the first time in 6 years, he felt the weight on his chest begin to lift. The wedding took place 1 week later in the village church. It was a small ceremony. Father Harley officiated. Kai stood beside them, solemn and proud in new clothes Alexander had purchased. A few villagers attended, curious about the Duke who had returned and the widow who would become his Duchess. Christopher Powell did not appear. The adoption papers had been filed, sealed with Alexander's ducal seal. Legally, Kai was now Kai Whittaker, heir to Blackmir. Christopher's claim had been destroyed, but Alexander had sent word through his solicitor. What a clear message. Any further approach toward Sophie or Kai would be met with full legal prosecution and social ruin. Christopher Powell was a man who understood power. He would not return. Sophie stood before the altar in a simple cream dress, her dark hair adorned with winter roses from the Blackmir gardens. She spoke her vows clearly, her voice steady, her eyes never leaving Alexander's. When Father Harley pronounced them husband and wife, Alexander kissed her gently. A promise sealed not just with words but with intention. As they left the church, Kai ran ahead, laughing, chasing fallen leaves. Sophie slipped her hand into Alexander's. "Are you afraid?" she asked quietly. "Terrified." "Good. So am I." He smiled. "Then we will be terrified together." They returned to Blackmir Hall as dusk fell, with the house glowing with candlelight in every window. Alexander had hired back some of the old staff, enough to bring warmth and life to the corridors. The drawing room had been prepared for a small celebration, a fire roaring, food laid out on the table. That night, after Kai had been put to bed in his new room, the one Alexander had chosen for him in the East Wing, bright and filled with morning sun, Sophie and Alexander stood together in the doorway of Logan's old room. "We should restore it," Sophie said. "Make it something new." "What would you make it?" "A library. A place for thought and peace. A place that honors memory without being haunted by it." Alexander nodded slowly. "Yes, I think Logan would like that." They closed the door and walked down the corridor together, side by side, toward their own chambers, toward a future neither had imagined 6 weeks ago. In the darkness, the house settled around them, no longer empty, no longer abandoned. Blackmir Hall was breathing again. Spring came to Blackmir. The gardens, long neglected, began to bloom under Sophie's direction. She hired workers from the village, replanting flower beds, clearing pathways, restoring the greenhouses. Kai spent his days running through the grounds, his laughter echoing off the old stone walls. Alexander threw himself into the estate's restoration. He met with tenants, renegotiated agreements, repaired cottages, rebuilt fences. The work was hard, but it was honest. It was building, not destroying. For the first time in years, he felt purpose. One afternoon in late April, a carriage arrived unexpectedly. Alexander was in the study when Sophie entered, her expression uncertain. "You have visitors." "Who?" "Your former wife." "And your children." Alexander's chest tightened. He had not seen Margaret or his daughters, Olivia and Ella, in over 4 years. The divorce had been bitter, fueled by his guilt and his refusal to explain why he was abandoning everything. "Did you know they were coming?" Sophie asked. "No." "Do you want me to—" "No, stay, please." Together they went to the entrance hall. Margaret stood there, older but still elegant, her auburn hair streaked with grey. Beside her were Olivia, now 15, and Ella, 13. Both girls stared at Alexander with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. "Alexander," Margaret said. Her voice was careful, neutral. "Margaret. Girls." An awkward silence fell. Then Kai appeared on the stairs, stopping when he saw the strangers. "Oh, Mama!" Sophie beckoned him down. "It is all right, darling. Come meet some people." Kai descended slowly, taking his place beside Sophie. Margaret's eyes widened slightly as she took in the boy, the way he stood close to Sophie, the way Alexander's hand rested protectively on his shoulder. "This is Kai," Alexander said. "My son." Olivia's eyebrows rose. "Your son?" "Yes. But he is not," Ella began, then stopped, confused. "He is adopted," Sophie said gently. "I am Sophie, Alexander's wife." Margaret studied Sophie for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I see. Congratulations." The word hung in the air, brittle and strange. "Why are you here?" Alexander asked, not unkindly. Margaret glanced at the girls, then back at him. "Because we heard you had returned. Because I wanted to see if it was true. And because—" She paused. "Because I wanted the girls to know their father again. If that is possible." Alexander felt his throat tighten. "I do not know if I deserve that." "Perhaps not. But they deserve the chance to decide for themselves." Olivia stepped forward. "You left. You disappeared. You did not write. You did not visit. Why?" The question was direct, cutting. Alexander saw Margaret tense, preparing to intervene, but he held up a hand. "Because I was a coward," he said quietly. "Because I believed I destroyed everything I touched. Because I was drowning in guilt and shame, and I thought the best thing I could do for you was to stay away." "Guilt over what?" Ella asked. Alexander looked at Sophie, who nodded encouragingly. Then he looked back at his daughters. Your Uncle Logan died here, in this house, and I blamed myself for his death. I could not bear to stay. I could not bear to be the man who had failed him. So I ran, and in running, I failed you as well." Olivia's expression softened. "We mourned him, too. We needed you. I know, and I am sorry. More sorry than I can ever express." Margaret spoke, her voice quiet. "We did not come here for apologies, Alexander. We came to see if you have changed, if you are ready to be a father again. I am trying to be, to Kai, and if you will let me, to Olivia and Ella as well." Olivia and Ella exchanged glances. Some silent communication passed between them. Then Olivia nodded. "We will stay for a few days. See how it goes." Relief flooded through Alexander. "Yes, please, stay as long as you like." Sophie stepped forward. "Let me show you to your rooms. Our Blackmir has plenty of space." As Sophie led Margaret and the girls upstairs, Kai tugged on Alexander's sleeve. "Are they my sisters now?" Alexander looked down at the boy, this child who had brought him back to life. "If they choose to be, would you like that?" Kai nodded. "I have always wanted sisters." Alexander smiled, a real smile, the kind he had not felt in years. "Then let us see if we can make that happen." Over the next 3 days, the house filled with a tentative warmth. Olivia and Ella were cautious at first, testing boundaries, watching Alexander with their mother's sharp eyes. But slowly, they began to soften. They explored the gardens with Kai. They asked questions about the estate. They sat at dinner and listened as Alexander told stories about Logan, stories he had not spoken in 6 years. Margaret observed it all with quiet assessment. On the final evening of their visit, she found Alexander alone in the library, the room that had once been Logan's. "You have changed," she said. "I have tried to. Sophie is good for you. She is better than I deserve." Margaret smiled faintly. "Perhaps. But she chose you anyway. That says something." She paused. "The girls want to return, in the summer, for a longer visit. They are welcome any time. This is their home too. It always was. I know. I just needed to see that you believed that." Margaret moved toward the door, then stopped. "I never blamed you for Logan's death, Alexander. I blamed you for running from it. From us. I know. I am sorry. I know. Now prove it." She left, and Alexander sat alone in the library, surrounded by books and light, and felt something he had not felt in 6 years. Peace. Before we end today's story, I want to ask one last favor. If you made it this far, if Alexander and Sophie's journey meant something to you, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. These stories take time, research, and heart to create. Your subscription tells us to keep going. It tells us you are here, and that matters more than you know. Thank you for watching. Now, let me give you the ending you deserve. Summer arrived in full glory. Olivia and Ella returned to Blackmir in June, this time for the entire season. They brought energy and laughter, filling the house with the sound of young voices. Kai adored them, following them everywhere, and they, in turn, became fiercely protective of their new brother. Alexander and Sophie worked side by side to restore the estate, but they cleared out the west wing entirely, transforming Logan's room into the library Sophie had envisioned. They filled it with books, comfortable chairs, wide windows that let in streams of sunlight. On the mantel, they placed a single portrait of Logan, smiling, young, alive in memory. One evening in late July, as the sun set over the Blackmir grounds, Alexander found Sophie in the garden, her hands dirty from planting, her face flushed with effort. "You are working too hard," he said. "I am making this place beautiful again." "It already is, because you are in it." She laughed, standing and brushing off her hands. You are sentimental. I am honest. He pulled her close, and she rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Do you regret it? He asked quietly. Staying here and marrying me? Not for a moment. Even knowing everything you know now. Especially knowing everything I know now. She looked up at him. You are not perfect, Alexander. Neither am I. But we are building something real here. Something good. That is enough. From the house came the sound of Kai's laughter, followed by Olivia calling for him to slow down. Ella's voice joined in, teasing and warm. Alexander looked at the house, at the lights glowing in the windows, at the gardens beginning to bloom again. He thought of Logan and the guilt he had carried for so many years. It had not disappeared. It never would. But it had transformed into something else. Something bearable. Remembrance. Responsibility. The determination to honor the past by building a better future. Come inside, Sophie said, taking his hand. Their dinner will be ready soon. In a moment. She smiled and walked back toward the house, her figure silhouetted against the warm light spilling from the doorway. Alexander stood alone in the garden for a moment longer, breathing in the scent of roses and earth and summer. Then he turned and followed his wife home. Blackmir Hall was no longer haunted, and neither was its duke. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. Alexander's story is one of guilt, redemption, and the courage to build again after loss. If this story touched you, please leave a comment below. Tell us what you thought. Tell us what you felt. And most importantly, if you have not subscribed yet, please do so now. We have so many more stories to share with you. Stories of love, of courage, of second chances. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Until next time, thank you for watching. We will see you in the next story.